Disgrace, shame, trash. Donald Trump spits the words across the chamber, his voice echoing like a hammer meant to crush Jasmine Crockett into silence. But silence never came. This was not just another hearing. Over 75 million Americans had their eyes glued to the screen. Outside, tens of thousands gathered, chanting for justice. Inside, two figures collided. Trump, the 47th president wielding raw power, and Jasmine Crockett, the fearless warrior of truth. Every insult sharpened the tension. Every fact threatened to shatter the lies. And what began as three venomous words would spiral into the most explosive showdown Congress had seen in decades. The chamber had not even settled. Papers shuffled, cameras adjusted, whispers swirled like restless winds. Then, bang! Jasmine Crockett slammed her palm against the wooden table, the sharp crack ricocheting through the hall like a bolt of thunder. Every head snapped toward her, every breath held hostage. Her voice cut through the air with no hesitation, no filter, no fear. "Donald Trump," she thundered, her eyes blazing, "you are a danger to democracy itself." The accusation struck like a lightning bolt, splitting the silence in half. Trump leaned back in his chair, lips curling into that familiar smirk. Half amusement, half menace. He tilted his head, as though savoring the challenge, then let out a mocking laugh that dripped with contempt. "Oh, Jasmine," he sneered, dragging out her name like a curse. "You're nothing more than a witch hunter, a desperate nobody looking for attention." Gasps scattered across the chamber. Some jaws dropped, others clenched. Even the cameras seemed to zoom in tighter, sensing blood in the water. Jasmine did not blink. She did not flinch. Her knuckles pressed hard against the table, her spine straight as steel. The chamber froze. And then, fire. Words exploded between them, each insult louder, sharper, hotter than the last. "You sit here pretending to lead, but all you've ever done is deceive," Jasmine shot back, her voice laced with fury. "You call this justice?" Trump barked, jabbing a finger at her like a weapon. "This is a circus, and you're the clown." The audience trembled in their seats. Staffers exchanged frantic looks. A gavel banged repeatedly, but the pounding was swallowed by the roar of voices colliding like crashing waves. It wasn't a hearing anymore. It was a battlefield. Trump's voice boomed with the arrogance of power, but Jasmine's words carried the sting of truth. He hurled insults like stones, each one designed to break her down. She hurled facts back at him, each one sharper than a blade. "Mr. President," Jasmine spat the title like poison, "you think power shields you, but no amount of titles can cover up lies." Trump leaned forward now, eyes narrowed, voice dripping with disdain. "You don't belong here, Jasmine. You're weak, you're unqualified, you're just loud noise." Her lips curled into a razor-thin smile. "If I'm noise, Mr. Trump, then today you will hear me loud and clear." The chamber erupted again. Shouts, cheers, jeers. It was chaos, raw and electric. Camera flashes burst like fireworks. Journalists scribbled furiously. Across America, living rooms buzzed, viewers gripping their armrests as if watching a prize fight. Outside, chants thundered through the streets, Jasmine's name echoing against the marble walls. Inside, every second dragged the confrontation deeper, hotter, deadlier. Trump slammed a fist against his desk. "This is a disgrace." Jasmine slammed hers back in perfect rhythm. "No, this is accountability." The collision of voices rattled the chamber to its foundation. This wasn't politics anymore. This was survival. Every glare was a dagger, every pause a coiled spring, every word a spark threatening to ignite the entire room into flames. Trump, the sitting 47th president, radiated the smugness of unchecked power. Jasmine, the justice warrior, radiated the fire of unyielding truth. Two storms colliding, two worlds colliding, and not a soul in that chamber could look away. For years, America had been waiting for this. For years, injustice had been festering in the cracks of democracy. And now here it was, justice and corruption standing face to face, spitting fire, daring the other to blink first. Not one eye blinked, not one word softened, and so the chamber became the stage for history's most brutal verbal duel. Every viewer watching knew it. This was just the beginning. Because what Jasmine Crockett unleashed in that moment was not just an accusation. It was the opening cannon of a war that would burn through the walls of Congress and carve itself into the nation's memory forever. And if you want to keep witnessing this storm unfold, every word, every clash, every revelation, make sure you're with us here on Harrison Stories. This is where truth meets fire. Trump leaned back in his chair again, smirk sharpened into a blade. He no longer shouted. He didn't need to. His voice dropped low, silky, laced with venom. "You know what the real disgrace is," he said, his eyes locking on Jasmine like a predator. "It's that someone like you, a second-rate lawyer from Texas, actually thinks she has the credibility to lecture me." The chamber buzzed. The insult wasn't just aimed at Jasmine's argument. It was aimed at her identity, her career, her worth. Trump dragged his words with relish, each syllable dipped in cruelty. "You've built nothing. You've led nothing. You've done nothing. You're an empty suit screaming for relevance." A few chuckles slipped from the back rows, sympathizers feeding on his taunts. Jasmine's jaw tightened. Her nails dug into the wood of the table, yet her eyes never wavered. She inhaled once, deep, controlled. Then she struck. "Mr. Trump," she began, her tone steady as stone, "you want to talk about building? About leading? Let's talk about the mountains of debt you've built, the trails of bankruptcy you've led, the billions you've bled from this country while padding your own pockets." The chamber went silent. Even the gavel froze midair. Jasmine's words sliced clean through the smog of insults, landing with the weight of undeniable fact. Trump's smirk twitched, just slightly, but Jasmine wasn't finished. She leaned forward now, voice gathering strength like a storm. "You call me irrelevant? Tell that to the families cheated by your fake university. Tell that to the workers left unpaid after your casinos collapsed. Tell that to the taxpayers who foot the bill while you hide behind loopholes." Gasps erupted. Murmurs rolled across the chamber like thunder. Trump's face hardened. The playfulness drained, replaced by a flash of something darker. Rage. He slammed his fist on the desk, rattling the microphone. "Lies! Absolute lies!" But Jasmine pressed on, her words relentless. "You speak of disgrace, Mr. President, but disgrace is a man sitting in the highest office while his empire of fraud rots beneath him. Disgrace is pretending to be a leader while cashing in on corruption." Trump leaned forward, eyes narrowed to slits, voice rising with fury. "You're pathetic, Jasmine. You're weak. You're only here because you checked the right boxes. Without your race, without your gender, you'd be nothing." The insult cracked like a whip. The chamber erupted. Shouts of outrage, gasps of disbelief, furious protest clashing with smug smirks. The gavel hammered down again and again. "Order! Order!" the chair cried, his voice trembling with desperation. But order was gone. Order had no place here. Jasmine's eyes blazed like fire now. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. "Without my race? Without my gender?" she said, her voice sharp and cold. "No, Mr. Trump. Without your lies, without your corruption, without your stolen platforms, you'd be nothing." The words landed like a guillotine. For a moment, even Trump was silent. His jaw clenched, his knuckles white against the desk. His smirk had vanished, replaced by raw, naked fury. The chamber shook with noise, some cheering Jasmine's courage, others shouting in defense of Trump. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras flashed like lightning strikes, capturing history as it was carved into the air. The gavel banged again, but it was like striking stone against a wildfire. The flames would not be contained. Trump tried again, reaching deeper into the arsenal of venom. "You think you're righteous, Jasmine? You're nothing but a political parasite, feeding off outrage, feeding off my name. Without me, you wouldn't even exist in this room." Jasmine's smile cut sharper than any insult. "Then consider this poetic justice, Mr. Trump, because it's your corruption that created the very platform that will now destroy you." The chamber roared. The chair buried his face in his hands, whispering, "Order," like a prayer that would never be answered. Trump's face reddened, veins pulsing, his voice breaking into an unhinged roar. "You will regret this. But Jasmine only stood taller, her voice unshaken. No, Mr. Trump. The only regret here will be yours. The regret of underestimating the truth. The audience erupted again, chaos spilling over the walls. The hearing was no longer a hearing. It was a battlefield, a cage, an arena where words became weapons sharper than steel. And as Trump and Jasmine locked eyes, fury against fire, venom against truth, one fact became clear to everyone watching. This storm had only just begun. Trump adjusted his tie, his breathing heavy but controlled. The rage that had flashed across his face a moment ago now melted into something colder, more deliberate. He knew fury wouldn't win him this battle. Not here. Not now. He needed a new mask. And so he put it on. Look at this, Trump said, voice dropping into a tone of wounded indignation. His hands spread wide, palms up, like a preacher calling for sympathy. This is what I've endured for years. Lies, attacks, smears. I am the victim here, not her. Me. Gas rippled across the chamber. Cameras zoomed tighter, drinking in every calculated expression. I've given everything to this country, he continued, chest rising with manufactured conviction. And what do I get in return? Witch hunts. Endless witch hunts. It's harassment. Pure harassment. The words spread like smoke. Thick. Inescapable. Some in the crowd nodded, their faces softening. Senators aligned with him leaned forward, seizing their cue. One of them rose, voice booming with theatrical outrage. This is disgraceful. A sitting president being berated like a criminal? This is beneath the dignity of Congress. Another chimed in, stabbing a finger toward Jasmine. She's the one grandstanding here. She's turning this into a circus for her own gain. A third slammed his hand against the desk, shouting over the chaos. Mr. President, you don't have to defend yourself against these baseless attacks. We stand with you. The tide shifted. The energy in the room tilted like a scale tipped by invisible weight. Suddenly, Jasmine was no longer just confronting Trump. She was facing a wall of voices, a chorus of sycophants weaving a shield around him. Trump sat back, letting the performance unfold. He smiled, smug, satisfied, serpent-like. See, he said, gesturing toward his allies. They know the truth. They see through your charade, Jasmine. You're nothing but a bully, trying to tear down the man who saved this nation. The crowd murmured again, louder this time. Save this nation. Victim. Witch hunt. The words repeated, echoed, amplified, like propaganda taking root in real time. Jasmine's fingers curled into fists beneath the table. She felt the weight pressing against her, the walls closing in, the suffocating spin of Trump's narrative wrapping around the room like barbed wire. But her eyes still burned. She refused to look away. Her silence was not weakness. It was gathering force, like a wave retreating before it crashes. Trump leaned in, his voice syrupy sweet now, dripping with mock compassion. Jasmine, maybe you should sit this one out. You look tired, overwhelmed. This job is too big for you. Why don't you let the adults handle it? The words landed like daggers, disguised as kindness. The chamber chuckled nervously. His allies laughed outright. Jasmine exhaled slowly, steadying the fire inside her chest, because she knew what Trump was doing. He wasn't just fighting her, he was performing, manipulating, turning cameras into allies, headlines into weapons, perception into armor, and it was working. For the first time, she felt the tide of the room shift against her. The audience murmured doubt. The energy trembled with uncertainty. But Jasmine Crockett did not break. Her back remained straight. Her gaze never faltered. Trump smirked, mistaking her silence for surrender. He spread his arms wide, basking in the illusion of triumph. Ladies and gentlemen, and he declared, this is what persecution looks like. They've tried to destroy me from day one, but I am still standing, stronger than ever. The chamber erupted in cheers from his side, pounding desks in rhythm. The chair's gavel thundered, desperate. Order! Order in this chamber! But order was a ghost. The air was thick with tension, heavy with Trump's narrative spinning like a spider's web. And caught in its center stood Jasmine, alone, cornered, surrounded. Yet even in that corner, her eyes burned with defiance. Because beneath the mocking laughter, beneath the false applause, beneath the twisted narrative, she knew one truth. Storms can shift direction in a heartbeat, and when they do, the ones who laugh the loudest are often the first to drown. Jasmine's hand moved slowly, deliberately, as though she had been waiting for this very moment. The mocking chuckles still echoed in the chamber when she reached beneath her desk and lifted a thick black folder. Its edges were sharp, its weight undeniable. She didn't speak at first. She let the silence grow heavy, let every eye follow her hand as she laid the folder on the table with a thud that sounded louder than any gavel. The smirks began to fade. Trump's gaze flicked to the folder. His jaw twitched. Jasmine's voice cut through the silence like a blade. For weeks, you've called me irrelevant. For hours, you've mocked me as weak. But tell me, Mr. Trump. Her hand slid across the folder, pulling it open page by page. Does irrelevance look like this? Gasps exploded as the first document hit the table. Numbers, signatures, hidden accounts, evidence. The chamber seemed to inhale as one, a sharp collective breath sucked into a single moment. Jasmine raised one page high, her voice steady, commanding. Here lies proof, direct proof, that millions of taxpayer dollars were siphoned into shell companies tied directly to your businesses. The room erupted. Shouts, cries, protests, disbelief. Reporters scrambled like sharks, cameras snapping with machine gun ferocity. Trump's smile faltered, only for a second. He leaned back, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle, strained. Oh, please, that's nothing but another fabrication. Fake documents, a desperate stunt. But his face had turned pale beneath the orange glow of lights. Jasmine slammed another sheet down. Fabrication? Then why does your signature sit at the bottom of this transfer order? The camera zoomed in so close they caught the ink of his name, bold and unmistakable. The chamber shook with chaos. Senators shouted over each other, some demanding order, others demanding Trump's resignation right there and then. The gavel pounded so furiously it sounded like artillery. Order! Order in this chamber! But order was dead. This was war. Trump forced another laugh, but the edges of his mouth trembled. You think this proves anything? This is politics. This is theater. I've been audited more times than anyone alive. And guess what? I always win. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She held up a final page, her voice rising above the storm. And what about the offshore accounts tied to foreign governments? Money funneled straight into your campaign while you stood on this floor swearing loyalty to the American people? The words hit harder than thunder. The chamber went feral and white. Shouts of traitor clashed with cries of witch hunt. A fist slammed against a desk. A woman gasped so loudly it echoed through the microphones. Outside, through the marble walls, the roar of the crowd broke through, chanting, louder, louder. Jasmine! 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 Her name rolled through the streets like an earthquake, like history itself calling out for justice. Reporters jammed microphones toward her, flashes blinding. The evidence she held gleamed under the lights, no longer paper, now dynamite. Trump tried again, his voice raised but shaky, clinging to arrogance like a sinking man clings to driftwood. This is pathetic. You think people care about some numbers on a page? They care about strength. They care about leadership. They care about me. But the words didn't land, not this time, because the world had already seen the documents. The cameras had already captured the signatures. And Jasmine stood taller than ever, her face illuminated by the firestorm she had unleashed. Her voice cut through the bedlam one last time. This is not about me. This is not about you. This is about truth. And no matter how loud you shout, no matter how hard you laugh, the truth will not be silenced. The chamber erupted into a fever pitch, chaos inside, revolution outside. Trump sat frozen, his smile broken, his mask slipping. Jasmine's folder lay open like a wound across his legacy, and the nation watched, breathless, as the balance of power shifted before their eyes. And if you want to witness where this storm leads, the next clash, the next revelation, the next tremor that shakes the nation, make sure you're with us here on Harrison Stories. Because history isn't just written. Here, you live it. Trump shot up from his chair so suddenly it nearly toppled backward. His face flushed crimson, his chest heaving. The calm mask he had worn seconds ago shattered. In its place came pure, unfiltered rage. "You're a traitor," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "You don't care about America. You want to tear it down from the inside." The chamber convulsed with shock. The word traitor cracked like a whip, electrifying the room. Reporters gasped. Some senators shouted in protest, others in agreement, the chamber fracturing like glass under pressure. Trump pointed a shaking finger at Jasmine, his whole body trembling with fury. "You don't represent justice. You represent betrayal. You're selling this country out, and you're doing it in plain sight." His voice cracked with the force of his scream, spittle flying, his fists slamming against the table again and again. But Jasmine did not move. She simply sat there, eyes locked on him, her lips curving into the faintest, coldest smile. Her silence was louder than his roar, and when she finally spoke, her voice slid through the chamber like a knife's edge. "Accuse me all you want, Mr. Trump, but treason—" She let the word hang, sharp as glass. "Treason is bending the knee to foreign money while pretending to wave the American flag." The word sliced him open. Trump lunged forward, both hands gripping the desk. His roar was primal. "Lies! You're the enemy of the people. You're the reason this country is falling apart." Jasmine tilted her head, calm, calculating, her eyes narrowing with precision. "An enemy of the people doesn't expose corruption. An enemy of the people doesn't shine light into shadows. That title belongs to you, Mr. Trump, and you've worn it well." The crowd erupted, voices clashing like steel. "Order!" the chair screamed, gavel pounding. But order had fled long ago. Trump's face twisted, veins throbbing at his temples. His voice had lost its rhythm, lost its control. It was raw, desperate, unhinged. "You should be ashamed. You should be locked up for what you've done. You hate this country." Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her smile unbroken. Her words were soft, deadly. "No, Mr. Trump, I don't hate this country. I hate what you've done to it." The chamber froze. The line hung heavy, a thunderbolt suspended in midair. Reporters scribbled furiously, knowing they had just witnessed history sealed in one sentence. Trump roared again, his voice breaking. "I am this country. Without me, there is nothing." Jasmine's laugh was cold, almost pitying. "Then this country deserves better than you." The crowd exploded once more, shouts overlapping, some voices screaming her name, others calling for her removal. Trump pounded the desk with both fists, his body shaking with unrestrained fury. He looked less like a leader and more like a man unraveling, tearing at the threads of his own power. And yet Jasmine sat still, poised, controlled. Every word she spoke was measured, sharp, a dagger driven clean into the heart of his tantrum. "You call me traitor," she said softly, "but treason is letting your ego tower higher than the Constitution. Treason is putting yourself above the people you swore to serve." The air crackled with fire. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the sweat on Trump's forehead, the ice in Jasmine's gaze. Across the nation, millions leaned closer to their screens, hearts pounding, coffee cups set untouched, phones buzzed, unanswered. America was watching, transfixed, unable to look away. Because this was no longer just politics. This was a trial by fire. Trump, the raging storm of arrogance and fury. Jasmine, the cold steel of justice refusing to bend. Two forces colliding in a chamber that could no longer contain them. And as Trump screamed, and Jasmine cut deeper with every calm reply, one thing became clear to the watching world. This wasn't just a hearing. This was the fight for the soul of a nation. But what followed was no longer shouting. It was war in its purest, most dangerous form. War fought not with fists, but with words. Jasmine leaned into the silence, her tone crisp, deliberate, laced with the authority of the law itself. "The Constitution," she began, her voice calm yet unyielding, "is not a weapon to brandish at enemies. It is the foundation that keeps every one of us accountable, and no man, no matter his title, is above it." Her words struck like thunder in their precision. Each sentence sharpened, anchored in precedent, armed with the weight of history. Trump countered, not with law, but with theater. He slammed his palm against the table and laughed, a deep, mocking laugh that filled the chamber like smoke. Spare me the lecture. The people don't care about your dusty books and your little rules. They care about strength. They care about survival, and I'm the only one strong enough to save them. His words were blunt, primal, designed not to convince the mind, but to stir the gut. The chamber split in two. On one side, Jasmine's defenders rose, pounding the air with phrases of law and liberty, their voices weaving around hers like a choir of reason. On the other, Trump's loyalists shouted him on, their chants raw, guttural, echoing like war drums in the marble hall. The air vibrated with fury. Every sentence from Jasmine met with thunderous rebuttals. Every declaration from Trump ricocheted back in waves of outrage. It was no longer a hearing. It was a battlefield of rhetoric, a collision of philosophies, live before the eyes of a nation. Order! The chair's voice cracked, the gavel pounding without mercy. But order had long since bled away. Jasmine lifted a document high, her hand steady as stone. Article 2, Section 4, she declared, the words rolling like scripture. It says plainly, the president shall be removed for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. This is not about politics, Mr. Trump. It's about accountability. Trump smirked, leaning forward like a predator ready to strike. Accountability, he sneered. You talk about law, but the law is written by the winners. And he jabbed his finger into the desk, I win. The words slashed the chamber like a blade, arrogant and undeniable. Gas rippled through the crowd. Some of his allies roared with approval. Others shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing too late that his pride had slipped into confession. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Her reply came swift, cold, surgical. Then thank you, Mr. Trump, for reminding America exactly why the law exists, to protect us from men who confuse winning with justice. A cheer erupted from her side of the chamber, rising above the chaos like a wave cresting against the storm. Trump's jaw tightened, his face a mask of rage, but his eyes flickered, just for a second, with the glimmer of doubt. Because this was no longer just theater. This was a duel of minds. Jasmine's blade was the law, precise, cutting, impossible to dull. Trump's weapon was chaos, raw, reckless, designed to overwhelm by sheer force. Two arsenals, two strategies, one chamber. The senators became soldiers, their shouts transforming into volleys of ammunition. Every phrase hurled across the floor landed like cannon fire, shaking the air, rattling the very architecture of democracy. It was intellect against instinct, discipline against spectacle, principle against power. And the nation, breathless, was watching it all unfold, knowing that whichever weapon triumphed here would shape the future of America itself. And the storm was still gathering force. The battle of words had only just begun, and the reckoning was far from over. Now Jasmine rose from her seat, not with fury but with focus. Her hands carried a thin stack of papers, evidence gathered like arrows, sharpened for this very moment. The chamber grew still. Even Trump, still sneering, narrowed his eyes. Jasmine laid the documents on the table, her voice steady, slicing through the silence. For hours we've heard bluster, we've heard deflection, but now we will hear the truth. She lifted the first page. Financial records, wire transfers, a pattern of movement that cannot be dismissed as coincidence. The papers rustled like fire in the still air. Trump shifted in his chair. He crossed his arms, forced a smirk. Oh, here we go again. Another hoax, another witch hunt. But Jasmine did not pause. Her second page struck harder. Shell companies, anonymous accounts, money funneled in the dark, siphoned while Americans struggled to survive a pandemic. Gas shot through the chamber. Reporters leaned forward, their pens scratching furiously. And then came the third blow. Names, partners, hidden deals made while standing behind this very seal of the presidency. These are not rumors. These are receipts. The chamber erupted. Voices collided. Outrage, disbelief, vindication. Trump slammed his fist against the table. "Lies!" he thundered. His face flushed red, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked as if it might crack. "You're a fraud, Jasmine. A pathetic fraud. You think you can take me down with paper? With paper?" His voice cracked into a raw scream. A word slipped from his mouth, one unfit for broadcast, one so venomous that even his allies winced. The mask was slipping. The statesman's veneer, the proud President 47, fractured before the cameras, leaving only the raw, unfiltered rage beneath. Jasmine did not flinch. Her eyes burned steady, her voice unwavering. "This is not my word against yours, Mr. Trump. This is your word against your own record." The gallery thundered. Journalists scrambled, phones lit up, live streams exploded with comments. And outside, where thousands had gathered behind barricades, the silence shattered. Cheers erupted, swelling like a tidal wave. "Jasmine! Jasmine!" The crowd roared, pounding against the barriers. Flags waved, fists rose, the chant shaking the very ground beneath the Capitol. It was no longer just a hearing, it was a reckoning echoing through every street, every screen, every living room in America. Trump tried to shout over her. He leaned forward, his spit hitting the microphone. "You're nothing, you hear me? Nothing. Without me, this country burns." But his words were drowned, not just by Jasmine's next revelation, but by the roar of the people outside. Because in that moment, it wasn't Jasmine speaking alone. It was the voice of a nation, angry, betrayed, desperate for justice, rising through her, amplified by the evidence she laid bare. The truth was no longer hidden. The mask was no longer intact. And as the walls shook with the force of that revelation, one thing became clear. This was no longer about one woman against one man. It was the people against the illusion he had built. And the illusion was cracking. Trump could feel it, like glass splintering under the weight of truth. And with every second Jasmine spoke, those cracks spread further across the mask he had worn for years. He slammed his hands down on the desk so hard the microphone squealed. "Enough!" he barked, his voice shaking the chamber like a cannon blast. "This hearing is a disgrace. I demand it be adjourned now." The words weren't a request. They were an order. The order of a man who still believed that power itself was enough to bend reality. The chair froze, the gavel in midair, unsure if to strike or submit. Half the senators rose instantly, shouting in Trump's defense. Their chants drowned the air. "Adjourn! Adjourn! Adjourn!" A chorus of obedience that turned the chamber into a storm. But then came the backlash. The other half rose just as quickly, pounding their fists against the wood, voices booming. "Let her speak! Let her speak!" It was chaos, pure chaos. Two tides colliding in the same sea, waves crashing so violently the walls themselves seemed to tremble. Reporters scrambled to capture every moment, cameras snapping like gunfire, feeds spilling the madness across every screen in America. Trump leaned back in his chair, chest heaving, sweat glistening at his temple. He pointed directly at Jasmine, his finger like a blade. "You don't belong here. You are an insult to this country, to this institution, to everything we stand for." But Jasmine did not move. She stood in the center of the storm, her face carved from steel, her eyes fixed on him. Her silence was louder than his rage. The chamber erupted further. Allies shouted until their voices cracked. Opponents hurled words so sharp they might as well have been weapons. The chair pounded the gavel again and again, each strike swallowed by the roar. It no longer looked like governance. It looked like war. Trump, refusing to let the chaos subside, bellowed into the microphone. "Disperse this circus. End it now before this country burns to the ground." His voice broke into a growl, desperate, ragged, yet unyielding. And in that instant, Jasmine finally spoke. Not with volume, but with calm. Her voice threaded through the storm like a single beam of light. "You can scream, you can threaten, you can command, but you cannot erase the truth." The words cut deeper than a shout ever could. The room fell, if only for a heartbeat, into silence. Even Trump's most loyal allies hesitated, their chants faltering as her words lingered in the air like smoke after a cannon shot. Trump bared his teeth, fury twisting his face into something feral. He looked less like a president than a cornered animal, thrashing at the cage of reality. The chair tried once more to restore order, the gavel striking with desperation. But order was gone. It had evaporated into the air, replaced with a battlefield where loyalty and principle fought for supremacy. And through it all, Jasmine remained standing, still, unshaken, her presence anchoring the room. Outside, the crowd sensed the shift. The chants grew louder, the barricades shuddered under the weight of fists and voices. The people were no longer spectators. They were soldiers in this war of truth. Back inside, Trump's voice thundered one last time, breaking through the cacophony. This will not stand. I am the President of the United States. You hear me? The President. The Q1, but the declaration sounded less like power and more like desperation. Because titles mean nothing when truth stands in the room. And truth had a name, Jasmine Crockett. For hours, the chamber had echoed with rage, accusations, and chaos. But now, her moment arrived. Jasmine rose, her frame small compared to the towering men around her, yet her presence filled the chamber like a storm about to break. Her first words cut through the uproar, like a blade through smoke. "You call this a circus?" she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "No, Mr. Trump, this is justice, and justice has no curtain you can tear down, no spotlight you can dim." The noise faltered, shouts quieted, as if the chamber itself leaned forward to listen. She turned toward Trump, her gaze steady, unflinching. "You said you win. You said titles put you above the law. But let me remind you of something very simple. The presidency is not ownership. It is stewardship. And you failed the people you swore to serve." Trump bristled, opening his mouth to interrupt. But Jasmine struck again before he could draw breath. "You lied to them. You drained their pockets while filling yours. You claimed strength, but what you really peddled was fear." Each word landed with the weight of a hammer. The chamber shook, not with chaos, but with the power of truth-breaking chains. Trump tried to sneer, but the sneer faltered. He raised his hand as if to swat her away, but her voice only grew stronger. "You wanted them divided. You wanted them afraid. Because divided people are easy to control. But united people?" Her eyes swept across the chamber, then to the cameras. "They are unstoppable." The crowd outside roared in perfect synchrony, as if her words had traveled through walls and wires to land directly in their hearts. "Jasmine! Jasmine!" The chant rolled like thunder. Trump slammed his fist against the table again. "This is slander! You can't prove—" But Jasmine's hand lifted, silencing him with the gesture alone. "Oh, I can prove it. And I have." She spread the documents before her, pages fanning across the desk like cards in the hand of a master player. "These transfers, these deals, these names. This isn't rumor, Mr. Trump. This isn't spin. It's your signature, your allies, your corruption, etched in ink that does not fade." Trump's face burned crimson. He muttered under his breath, curses spilling, his composure unraveling further with each second. Jasmine pressed forward. "You cloak yourself in patriotism, but a true patriot doesn't sell out their people. You scream about loyalty, but loyalty to a man is not loyalty to a country. And when history writes this chapter, it will not remember your noise. It will remember your betrayal." The chamber fell silent. Even Trump's defenders lowered their eyes, their chance evaporating in the weight of her words. Jasmine's voice deepened, steady as stone. "This is not about me versus you. This is about America versus corruption, the people versus fear. And let me make this very clear." She leaned forward, her gaze burning into him. "You will not win this battle, because truth doesn't bow, and justice doesn't break." For a moment, even Trump was forced into silence. His mouth hung open, his fury trapped by the sheer force of her words. Outside, the chants grew louder, swelling until it sounded as if the very city was shouting her name. Inside, she stood like a torch in the darkness, every syllable cutting sharper than the last, every line striking deeper than any insult he had hurled at her. The balance had shifted. The chamber, once a battlefield of noise, now belonged to her. And in that silence, that absolute stillness, a nation watching from screens and sidewalks alike understood something profound. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for them. And for the first time, Donald Trump, the man who thrived on control, who built an empire on volume, was forced to do the one thing he despised most. He listened. For the first time, Donald Trump, the man who thrived on control, who built an empire on volume, was silent. But silence could not last. When he finally spoke, his words detonated like cannon fire. You think you can lecture me? You, a nobody from nowhere, dare to stand against the President of the United States? The chamber shuddered under the weight of his roar. His voice was raw, sharpened by rage, every syllable designed to dominate, to crush. But Jasmine did not bow. She fired back with the calm precision of a sniper. No, Mr. Trump, I am not standing against the presidency. I am standing against you. And there is a difference. The words cracked through the chamber like lightning. Trump's face twisted, his finger stabbing the air. You're a traitor, a disgrace. You want to destroy this country. Her reply came swift, her voice steel wrapped in flame. I want to save this country from the lies, the corruption, the fear. You've fed it like poison. The clash was no longer words alone. It was fire against fire, thunder against thunder. Every exchange was a strike. Every sentence was a blade. Reporters typed furiously, cameras whirred, screens across the world lit up. The feed carried this battle to living rooms in London, to phones in Nairobi, to televisions in Tokyo. Billions of eyes watched as two figures collided, justice and power locked in mortal combat. Trump leaned into the microphone, his voice low now, venomous. You think they love you. You think the people chant your name. But when the smoke clears, they will still choose me. They always do. Jasmine's lips curved into a smile, not warm, but cold, knowing. History does not remember bullies as saviors. It remembers them as warnings. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even some of Trump's defenders looked shaken, their confidence cracking as the words sank deep. The tension thickened until the air felt unbreathable. Senators sat frozen, eyes darting between them. The gavel had long since stopped. It was useless now. Trump slammed his hand again, his voice escalating into fury. You're weak. You're soft. You don't have what it takes to lead. But Jasmine rose taller, her voice cutting sharper than his rage. Strength is not measured by how loudly you shout, but by how firmly you stand. And I am still standing. The chamber erupted, shouts colliding, a tempest of noise and disbelief. But somehow her voice rose above it all, clear, relentless, undeniable. You use fear as your weapon. I use truth. And truth does not tire. It does not bend. And it will not lose to you. Trump's jaw locked, his hands gripping the desk so tightly his knuckles whitened. For the first time his volume faltered. Not because he had nothing to say, but because no amount of shouting could drown her out. It was a duel of absolutes, his fury against her resolve, his empire of noise against her fortress of law. The world watched, transfixed. It felt less like a hearing and more like a trial carved into history, a spectacle so raw, so consuming, it demanded every heartbeat of attention. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes burning with the fire of millions who had placed their hope in her. You call yourself a winner, but true victory is not measured in power seized, it's measured in justice served. And by that measure, Mr. Trump, you have already lost. The chamber held its breath. Trump opened his mouth, but nothing came. His rage boiled, yet no weapon left in his arsenal could cut through the storm of her words. Because the storm was no longer his, it belonged to her. And in that moment, beneath the roar of cameras, the chants outside, the collective gasp of a watching world, it became clear. This was not just confrontation. This was reckoning. And the climax of the battle for America's soul was burning right before their eyes. The storm had reached its peak. The chamber quivered under the clash of wills, the thunder of voices, the clash of power and truth. And then, silence. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, deliberately, like a soldier preparing to deliver the final strike. Her hand hovered over a file, her eyes locked on Trump with unwavering resolve. "There is something," she said, her tone measured, almost quiet, yet every ear strained to catch her words. "Something you never expected to see the light of day." Trump narrowed his eyes, suspicion flickering. He leaned forward, trying to anticipate the ambush. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, his voice already fraying at the edges. Jasmine lifted the file, then tapped it against the desk. "A recording," she said. "Your voice, your words. Proof you knew exactly what you were doing." The room froze. For a beat, only the sound of cameras whirring filled the void. Even the chants outside seemed to hush, as if the crowd sensed the shift in the air. Trump scoffed, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a growl. "Fake! Another witch hunt! Another setup!" But Jasmine pressed a button, and his own voice filled the chamber. The tape crackled, then roared with damning clarity. Trump's voice, undeniable, unedited, slid through the speakers, dripping with arrogance and self-assurance. "They'll never catch me. They don't have the guts. I'll just deny, deny, deny. And by the time they figure it out, I'll already be back in the White House." Gas shot through the room like bullets. Trump's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked at the microphone, then at the senators, then at the cameras that were capturing every twitch, every flinch. The mighty lion had been caught in his own roar. Jasmine didn't need to embellish. She let the recording speak for itself. She stood still, her silence more powerful than 1,000 words, her eyes never leaving him. The chamber erupted into chaos, shouts, curses, disbelief. But Trump remained motionless, frozen like a statue cracking under the weight of truth. For the first time, he had no comeback. No insult sharp enough, no distraction wild enough, no volume loud enough. His armor of bravado shattered. His empire of denial collapsed. The President 47 facade flickered and fell apart in front of the world. One senator whispered, "My God." Another buried his face in his hands. And outside, the crowd that had waited in tension for hours exploded. Cheers, chants, cries of triumph tore through the barricades, sweeping across the city like a tidal wave. The wall of silence had not just cracked, it had shattered. Jasmine finally broke her silence. Her voice was steady, unflinching, carrying the weight of history itself. "These are not my words. They are yours. And today they will follow you, not as a shield, but as chains." Trump's lips trembled. He slammed a fist against the desk, but it landed weak, hollow, nothing like the thunder he once commanded. This is... His voice faltered, the words dissolving. He was drowning before millions, and no hand would reach to save him, because the evidence was final, irrefutable, inescapable. In that instant, the divide between hero and villain crystallized. No more shadows, no more illusions. The nation had seen the truth, heard it with their own ears. And Donald J. Trump, once the untouchable, once the storm himself, stood small, exposed, beaten by the very thing he feared most, his own words. The gavel finally came down, but it was only a formality. The verdict had already been delivered, not by the committee, not by Jasmine alone, but by the weight of undeniable truth. The chamber trembled with history. Outside, fireworks burst into the sky as if the people themselves had conjured them. The chants grew deafening, no longer divided, no longer uncertain. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" And inside, Donald Trump's empire of defiance lay in ruins. The knockout had landed. The battle was over. But the story of what came next, of how a nation would rise from the ashes of this confrontation, was only beginning. The air was thick with the weight of finality. Every eye was fixed on the dais, every breath caught in the throat of history. The council leaned together, murmurs hushed but urgent. Pens scratched, brows furrowed, the gravity of the moment pressing down on their shoulders like centuries of expectation. This was no ordinary decision. This was the kind of verdict that would echo across generations. And then, like a thunderclap, clarity. The chair struck the gavel. Once, Twice, the chamber held its breath. The council finds the evidence irrefutable, the chair declared, voice resonant, carrying the solemnity of justice itself. We stand with Representative Jasmine Crockett. Truth has prevailed. Justice has spoken. The chamber erupted, not in chaos this time, but in catharsis. The roar of applause, the crash of cheers, the tears spilling freely from those who had prayed for this moment. It was as if the nation itself exhaled after years of holding its breath. Trump sat motionless, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white, but his eyes told the story. The fire was gone. The man who once weaponized swagger now found himself hollow, deflated, diminished before the world. Slowly he rose. The cameras tracked every movement, every tremor of his hand. His attempt at defiance faltered beneath the crushing weight of humiliation. Head bowed, he turned toward the exit. No words. No rallying cry. Just the heavy shuffle of defeat, echoing against marble walls that had witnessed triumphs and tragedies alike. The chamber did not rise for him. No one followed. He left as he had never imagined he could, alone. And as the doors closed behind him, history sealed its verdict. Donald Trump had fallen. But Jasmine, she stood radiant amid the storm's aftermath. Her chin lifted, her eyes blazing, her figure steady as a pillar of unbreakable resolve. She did not gloat. She did not sneer. She let the truth itself be her victory song. Yet even in silence, she became something more than herself, a symbol, a beacon, an embodiment of the nation's hunger for accountability, its thirst for integrity, its desperate need for leaders who would not bend to corruption or fear. The press surged forward, flashes exploding like fireworks, capturing her image as if engraving it into the memory of the world. Outside, chants rose louder than ever before. Not fractured, not divided, but unified. Jasmine! 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 Her name became the heartbeat of the crowd. In that instant, she was no longer just a congresswoman. She was justice personified. She was proof that the system, battered and scarred as it was, could still deliver truth when someone had the courage to fight for it. The curtain was falling, yes, but it was not the end of a play. It was the close of an era and the dawn of another. From the ashes of corruption, a new figure had risen, and her name was carved indelibly into the ledger of history. Jasmine Crockett, the woman who stood against the storm and prevailed. The woman who turned confrontation into transformation. The woman who reminded America and the watching world that justice is not a myth, not a relic, not a whisper lost to time. Justice lives, and tonight it had a face. The gavel fell one final time, not with the sound of bureaucracy, but with the resonance of destiny. And outside, as the sun broke through the storm clouds, America felt reborn. In the end, the clash between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump was never just about two voices colliding. It was about the eternal struggle between truth and deception, courage and corruption, light and shadow. What this story reminds us is simple yet profound. Justice is not an abstract idea. It is built daily through the choices we make, the words we speak, and the battles we dare to fight. And those storms will always return. Each of us carries the power to stand firm, to defend what is right, and to keep the flame of integrity alive. If this showdown shook you, don't just move on. Hold it. Share it. Let it spark the conversations too many are afraid to start. Like, comment, and send this to someone who knows that silence feeds corruption. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where truth is fire, and fire cannot be tamed. Hit the bell, because the next battle isn't quiet. It's fierce, and it might just change the way you believe justice is won. This is a dramatized story, born from real struggles, real voices, and real courage. Resemblances are not accidents. They are symbols, meant to reflect, to provoke, to awaken. Thank you for watching. Justice does not fall from the sky. It rises when people demand it. This is Harrison Stories.